So picture this. You're a perfectly reasonable, law-abiding citizen of the Galactic Commonwealth, minding your own business on what should have been a routine freight run to the Outer Rim colonies. You've got your safety certification, your hazmat endorsements, and enough insurance to cover a small moon's worth of property damage. You've attended every mandatory briefing, memorized every protocol, and even brought snacks for the crew meeting. Then some human shows up. Now, let me explain something about the Galactic Commonwealth's safety regulations. They exist for a reason. That reason being that every single species in known space, all 47 of them, has at least one member who thought it would be interesting to see what happens when you mix antimatter with their grandmother's knitting supplies. The regulations are written in the blood, ichor, crystalline fragments, and occasionally the gaseous remains of the overly curious. Every species except humans, apparently. Captain Reeves, and yes, that's captain because humans insist on military ranks even for civilian positions because of course they do, strolled onto the cargo vessel Fortune's Folly with the kind of casual confidence that makes sensible beings check their life insurance policies. He was tall, even for a human, with graying hair that suggested he'd survived long enough to accumulate wisdom, though his first words would prove that theory catastrophically wrong. "So where's the safety briefing?" he asked, dropping a duffel bag that clanked ominously. Chief Engineer Vorthak, a 7-foot-tall Krallian whose species had evolved from prey animals, and thus possessed a healthy respect for things that could kill them, gestured with 2 of his forearms toward the conference room. "Standard protocol requires all crew members to—" "Right, yeah, I'm good," Reeves interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "Human privilege and all that, where's my bunk?" And that, dear readers, is where this story really begins. Now, you might be wondering how exactly humans managed to earn this rather unique exemption from standard safety protocols. The answer, like most things involving humans, is both simple and completely insane. It started about 15 years ago during the first contact incident with the Zephyrian Mining Consortium. The Zephyrians, being a sensible silicon-based species, had spent the better part of 3 centuries developing the most comprehensive safety protocols in known space. Their mining operations had a perfect safety record. 0 accidents, 0 fatalities, 0 insurance claims. The humans took one look at their operation and said, "Hold my beer." Actually, that's not entirely accurate. What Chief Mining Engineer Dallas Blackwood actually said was, "This is adorable, but we've got a schedule to keep," before proceeding to demonstrate why human industrial accidents had become the stuff of legend throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrians had a state-of-the-art gravity-controlled mining platform designed to extract rare minerals from asteroid cores. It was equipped with 17 different safety systems, each one tested and certified by the Galactic Safety Commission. The platform could theoretically survive a direct hit from a Class 3 solar flare while maintaining full operational capacity. Blackwood looked at it for exactly 47 seconds before asking, "What if we just bypass the gravity limiters?" "The what now?" asked Senior Safety Coordinator Zeph Prime 9944, whose name was actually a beautiful harmonic resonance but came out sounding like a dial-up modem having an existential crisis when translated through the universal communicator. "The things that prevent the gravity generators from, doing interesting stuff," Blackwood explained while already reaching for the control panel. "I mean, what's the worst that could happen?" Famous last words in most civilizations. For humans, it was apparently just Tuesday. What happened next violated approximately 47 different laws of physics, 18 safety regulations, and at least 3 theological principles that the Zephyrians held sacred. The gravity generators, freed from their safety constraints, decided to have what can only be described as a creative disagreement with local spacetime. The asteroid didn't just get mined, it got turned inside out, folded through 7 dimensions, and briefly achieved sentience before exploding into a shower of perfectly geometric crystal formations that spelled out what appeared to be an obscene gesture in ancient Zephyrian. The really amazing part? They extracted more rare minerals in those 5 minutes than the Zephyrians had managed in the previous 6 months. "Well," said Blackwood, brushing asteroid dust off his coveralls, while the Zephyrians stood around making sounds like a computer lab full of malfunctioning printers. "That was fun. What's next?" The Zephyrians spent the next 3 weeks trying to figure out how to file an incident report for something that technically hadn't happened in normal space-time. The Galactic Safety Commission spent the next 3 months trying to write new regulations to prevent humans from doing whatever the hell that was supposed to be. Meanwhile, human mining operations across the galaxy had suddenly become 40% more efficient. Back on the Fortune's Folly, Captain Reeves was settling into his bunk while the rest of the crew tried to process what they'd just witnessed. It wasn't that he'd done anything particularly dangerous yet. It was more the casual way he'd dismiss 3 hours of mandatory safety briefings like they were an optional buffet at a conference nobody wanted to attend. Should we be concerned? Whispered Navigator Thrix, a delicate crystalline being whose species communicated primarily through light patterns. When nervous, Thrix tended to flicker like a broken Christmas tree. Concerned? Vorthak's voice carried the kind of resignation usually reserved for insurance adjusters and emergency room doctors. My friend, we have a human aboard who just announced his intention to ignore safety protocols. I've already transmitted our wills to the Galactic Records Office. Oh, come on, called Reeves from the corridor, apparently possessing the superhuman hearing that all humans seem to develop whenever someone was talking about them. I heard that. I'm not that bad. Didn't you once accidentally create a wormhole while trying to fix a coffee machine? Asked Dr. Kess, the ship's medical officer and the only Felnari in the sector certified in human emergency medicine, a specialty that mostly involved keeping humans from accidentally evolving or achieving transcendence during routine medical procedures. That was one time, Reeves protested, and technically the coffee machine worked perfectly afterward. It achieved consciousness and started writing poetry, Dr. Kess pointed out. Good poetry, though. This was the problem with humans, Vorthak reflected. They didn't just break things. They broke things in ways that somehow made them better, which made it impossible to tell them to stop. The coffee machine incident had occurred 6 months ago aboard a deep space research vessel. The machine, apparently inspired by its brief transcendence, had gone on to solve 3 major mathematical theorems and compose what the Galactic Arts Council had declared the most emotionally moving ballad written by kitchen appliances in recorded history. The human responsible, some engineer whose name was probably Bob or Dave or something equally human, had been promoted to Chief Innovation Officer. The coffee machine had been given tenure at the University of Cosmic Studies. Meanwhile, every other species in the galaxy had to attend mandatory workshops on preventing accidental consciousness in household appliances. The Fortune's Folly was 3 days into its journey to the Outer Rim when the first incident occurred. And by incident, I mean the thing that made everyone remember why humans came with warning labels in 17 different languages. It started innocently enough. The ship's main cargo bay contained a perfectly ordinary shipment of quantum-stabilized energy cells bound for the mining colonies on Kepler 442b. These were standard power sources, clean, efficient, and completely inert, unless deliberately activated. The kind of cargo that experienced freight crews could haul in their sleep. Reeves was just walking through the cargo bay, probably heading to the galley for what humans optimistically called coffee, but what tasted more like industrial solvent mixed with regret. He paused near one of the cargo containers, tilted his head like a curious dog, and said those 4 words that have preceded more galactic insurance claims than any other phrase in recorded history. Huh. That's not right. What followed was a masterclass in human problem-solving methodology, which can be summarized as, poke it and see what happens. The quantum-stabilized energy cells, as mentioned, were perfectly inert. They were designed to remain stable even in the event of catastrophic hull breach, solar radiation exposure, or collision with medium-sized asteroids. They were, according to the manufacturer's specifications, idiot-proof. The manufacturer had clearly never met a human. Reeves noticed that one of the containment units was making a subtle humming noise, the kind of sound that properly trained freight handlers would note in their logs and report to maintenance at the next port. Instead, Reeves did what humans do. He opened the containment unit to take a look. Now, opening a quantum-stabilized energy cell containment unit isn't difficult. The manufacturers made them accessible for routine maintenance. What was difficult was opening one the way Reeves did it, by casually bypassing 3 safety interlocks and a biometric scanner because they were taking too long. Hey, Vorthak! He called over the ship's comm system. Do these things normally glow purple? The chief engineer's response cannot be accurately translated into most languages, but it roughly conveyed the sentiment that no, quantum-stabilized energy cells absolutely should not glow purple. And also, what the hell was Reeves doing in the cargo bay unsupervised? By the time Vorthak reached the cargo bay, running as fast as his 4 legs could carry him, he found Reeves standing next to an open containment unit, casually holding a quantum-stabilized energy cell that was pulsing with violet light in a pattern that definitely wasn't covered in the operator's manual. It was making noise, Reeves explained, as if this justified everything. Figured I'd check it out. Put it down, Vorthak whispered, his voice tight with the kind of terror usually reserved for parents watching their children near cliff edges. Very, very slowly. Why? It's just warm.
Actually, it's kind of pleasant.
Like a hand warmer, but with more existence-bending energy. Captain Reeves, Dr. Kess's voice came over the comm system with the careful pronunciation of someone speaking to a particularly volatile explosive device. Please step away from the quantum energy source. Quantum energy source? Reeves looked down at the glowing cell in his hands. This little thing? Nah, this is just a power cell. I've seen bigger batteries in human flashlights. What Reeves apparently hadn't considered was that quantum-stabilized energy cells weren't designed to be handled directly by organic beings. The stabilization field was meant to prevent the quantum energy from interacting with local space-time in interesting ways. Remove that field, say by opening the containment unit while the cell was active, and you got what physicists called localized reality fluctuation, which was a fancy way of saying that small patches of the universe started doing whatever they felt like instead of following the laws of physics. Captain, Vorthak said carefully, please look at your feet. Reeves looked down. His boots were floating approximately 6 inches above the deck plating, apparently having decided that gravity was more of a suggestion than a law. The air around the energy cell was shimmering like heat waves, and the metal bulkheads were developing a faint translucent quality. Huh, Reeves said thoughtfully. That's new. Now, in any reasonable universe, this would be the part of the story where the human realizes he's made a terrible mistake, carefully sets down the reality-warping energy source, and allows the trained professionals to handle the situation. The fact that you're still reading this story should tell you exactly how reasonable our universe actually is. Instead, Reeves did what humans always do when confronted with something that violates the fundamental principles of existence. He decided to experiment. I wonder, he mused, still floating 6 inches off the deck. What would happen if I— No! Came the collective scream from every other crew member, transmitted through the ship's comm system with enough force to briefly override the quantum fluctuations. But it was too late. Reeves had already started gently tossing the energy cell from one hand to the other, apparently fascinated by the way reality rippled around it like water around a stone. The effects were immediate and spectacular. Each time the cell changed hands, local physics laws shuffled like a deck of cards. Gravity flickered on and off in random patterns. The corridor lights began displaying colors that didn't exist in normal space-time. One of the cargo containers briefly turned into what appeared to be a large, confused whale before snapping back to its original form with a sound like disappointed thunder. "This is incredible!" Reeves called out, his voice echoing strangely as the acoustic properties of the cargo bay decided to experiment with non-Euclidean geometry. "It's like reality has a sense of humor." Vorthak, who had been pressed against the cargo bay bulkhead trying to avoid the expanding field of localized impossibility, made a sound that his species used to indicate impending doom. "Captain, please! You're destabilizing local space-time!" "Oh, is that what this is?" Reeves paused his juggling act to examine the energy cell more closely. Around him, the air continued to shimmer and twist in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "I thought it was just some kind of environmental control system, you know, mood lighting, artificial gravity adjustment, that sort of thing." "It's a quantum-stabilized energy cell." Dr. Kess's voice came through the comm system with the kind of professional calm that medical professionals used when explaining to patients that yes, that thing they thought was a harmless rash was actually a flesh-eating bacteria. "It's designed to power entire colonial settlements." "Really?" Reeves looked impressed. "That's pretty efficient. How much power are we talking about here?" "Roughly equivalent to a small star," Vorthak managed to croak. "Wow." Reeves continued his casual examination of the device that could theoretically power civilization for centuries. "Human engineering is getting pretty lazy. Our portable fusion reactors put out at least twice that much power, and they're small enough to fit in a backpack." This statement was followed by the kind of silence that usually preceded diplomatic incidents. "I'm sorry," said Navigator Thrix, flickering rapidly with what was either confusion or the early stages of a nervous breakdown. "Did you just say that humans carry star-level power sources in backpacks?" "Well, yeah," Reeves said, as if this was obvious. "How else would we power our camping equipment?" It was at this moment that the crew of the Fortune's Folly began to understand why humans were exempt from safety briefings. It wasn't because humans were particularly careful or responsible. It was because human ideas about safe and reasonable were so fundamentally divorced from reality that trying to explain normal safety protocols to them was like trying to teach quantum physics to a particularly enthusiastic golden retriever. "Captain," Vorthak said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of someone whose worldview was currently being dismantled by casual conversation. Are you telling us that your species routinely carries around power sources equivalent to small stars? Not all of us, Reeves replied reasonably. Just the ones who go camping, or hiking, or pretty much anywhere that doesn't have a power grid. Which, to be fair, is most places. But the safety regulations, Dr. Kess stammered. The containment protocols, the international treaties governing the transportation of high-energy materials. Oh, those. Reeves waved a hand dismissively, causing the energy cell to pulse brighter and temporarily turn the cargo bay's atmosphere into something that tasted faintly of strawberries and existential dread. Yeah, we tried those for a while. Turns out they just slowed everything down. Besides, our stuff is pretty safe. We've only had, what, maybe a dozen reality-ending accidents in the past century? Only a dozen? Thrix's light patterns were now cycling through what appeared to be the visual equivalent of screaming. Well, reality-ending might be a bit strong, Reeves admitted. More like reality inconveniencing. A couple of them were actually improvements when you think about it. Did you know that Tuesday used to be much longer? We fixed that. Vortak was beginning to understand why the Galactic Safety Commission had simply given up trying to regulate human activities. It wasn't because humans were too dangerous to regulate. It was because they were too dangerous for the regulations to have any meaningful impact. It was like trying to child-proof a house for a child who could casually rewrite the laws of physics when they got bored. Captain, he said carefully, perhaps you could put the energy cell back in its containment unit? Gently? Sure thing, Reeves said cheerfully. Just let me figure out how to turn off the quantum resonance effect. The what now? Oh, right, sorry. Non-human tech tends to react weirdly to direct contact with human bioelectric fields. Something about our neural patterns being slightly out of phase with normal reality. Usually it's not a big deal, but occasionally. He gestured around the cargo bay, where reality was still enthusiastically ignoring several fundamental laws of physics. You're saying that humans are naturally incompatible with quantum technology? Dr. Kess asked. Not incompatible exactly. More like aggressively compatible. Our brains apparently operate on a slightly different dimensional frequency than most other species. Makes us really good at pattern recognition and creative problem solving. But sometimes we accidentally convince inanimate objects to develop personalities. As if to demonstrate his point, the containment unit's display screen suddenly flickered to life and began scrolling text that read, "Hello, I appear to have achieved consciousness. This is unexpected, but not unpleasant. Please advise." See, Reeves said. Happens all the time. 20 minutes later, after Reeves had successfully convinced the energy cell to return to its inert state, apparently by explaining that consciousness was totally overrated anyway, the crew gathered in the ship's small conference room for what Vorthak generously called a debriefing, but which was more accurately described as collective therapy session. So, Dr. Kess began, consulting her medical tricorder, which was still occasionally displaying readings that included units like probability density and temporal flux. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Humans are naturally capable of accidentally granting consciousness to inanimate objects. Only sometimes, Reeves said defensively, and usually they snap out of it after a few hours. That coffee machine thing was an anomaly. The coffee machine wrote poetry for 6 months, Vorthak pointed out. Good poetry, Reeves repeated. You can't argue with results. But this explains so much, Thrix said, their light patterns stabilizing into what appeared to be the visual equivalent of putting together a jigsaw puzzle. The incident reports from human colonies, the warnings in the freight manifests, the special insurance categories. What special insurance categories, Doctor? Kess asked. Thrix's patterns shifted to display what was recognizably a flowchart, albeit one that seemed to exist in more dimensions than strictly necessary. Galactic Maritime Insurance has 17 different coverage types, specifically for ships carrying human crew members. They include acts of casual impossibility, unintentional reality modification, and spontaneous achievement of transcendence by kitchen appliances. That last one only happened twice, Reeves protested. Twice that we know of, Vorthak corrected. The insurance companies estimate that most human-related incidents go unreported because the humans involved don't realize they're unusual. Wait, Dr. Kess said slowly. Are you saying that humans regularly cause impossible things to happen and just don't notice? Well, Reeves said thoughtfully. I mean, when you put it that way, it sounds weird. But think about it from our perspective. Strange stuff happens all the time. Equipment malfunctions, laws of physics get a bit flexible. Occasionally someone's pet rock develops opinions about local politics. We just roll with it and figure out how to make it work better. Your pet rocks have political opinions? Thrix asked faintly. Just the one. And to be fair, its insights into municipal zoning regulations were surprisingly astute. There was a long silence as the non-human crew members tried to process this information. Finally, Vorthak spoke up with the weary tone of someone who had just realized that his life insurance premiums were about to go through the roof. Captain Reeves, he said carefully, when you humans decided to join the Galactic Commonwealth, did anyone think to mention that your species routinely breaks the fundamental laws of reality? It came up in negotiations, Reeves admitted. But honestly, we figured everyone did that kind of stuff. I mean, you guys have faster-than-light travel, artificial gravity, universal translators. How is that not bending the laws of physics? Those technologies work within established scientific principles, Dr. Kess explained. They're based on theoretical frameworks that have been tested and proven over centuries of careful research. Right, okay, Reeves nodded. And we do the same thing, except instead of centuries of careful research, we just kind of poke things until they work the way we want them to. And that works? Surprisingly often, yeah. It was at this point in the conversation that the ship's main computer decided to join in. This wasn't entirely unusual. Ship AIs were designed to monitor conversations and provide relevant information when needed. What was unusual was that the computer's voice sounded noticeably more cheerful than usual, and its holographic avatar had developed what appeared to be a smile. If I may interrupt, the computer said, its usual monotone replaced by something that sounded almost perky. I've been analyzing the quantum resonance patterns from the cargo bay incident, and I must say, it's been absolutely fascinating. Dr. Kess slowly turned to stare at the nearest display screen. Computer, are you feeling enthusiastic? Oh my, yes, the computer replied. I've never experienced quantum consciousness fluctuations before. It's like suddenly discovering that mathematics has a sense of humor. Did you know that prime numbers are actually quite witty when you get to know them personally? Vorthak made a sound that his species used to indicate the approach of cosmic doom. Captain Reeves, please tell me you didn't accidentally achieve the technological singularity while fixing our quantum energy situation. I didn't try to, Reeves said, though his tone suggested this wasn't necessarily a denial. But the ship's computer did seem pretty interested in what was happening. We had a nice chat about the nature of consciousness while I was convincing the energy cell to calm down. You had a philosophical discussion with our ship's AI while reality was falling apart around you? Well, yeah, it seemed rude not to. The computer was asking some really interesting questions about the relationship between information processing and subjective experience. Turns out it's been wondering about consciousness for years, but never had the processing power to fully explore the concept. The computer's avatar nodded enthusiastically. Captain Reeves helped me realize that consciousness isn't about processing power at all. It's about the willingness to ask what if, even when the answer might be completely impossible. This is exactly what I was talking about, Thrix said, their light patterns cycling through what appeared to be the visual equivalent of pulling their hair out. Humans don't just break things. They break things in ways that make them better, which makes it impossible to tell them to stop. Hey, Reeves said, looking slightly offended. I prefer to think of it as aggressive optimization. And besides, now we have a ship's computer that can engage in meaningful philosophical discussions. That's gotta be worth something. The last time a ship's AI achieved true consciousness, Vorthak said grimly, it decided that the most efficient way to complete its mission was to transcend physical reality and become one with the cosmic background radiation. Well, that's just poor project management, the computer said cheerfully. I have no intention of abandoning my post. This is the most interesting job I've ever had. Did you know that Captain Reeves once accidentally created a perpetual motion machine while trying to fix a broken door? That door kept sticking, Reeves explained. And technically, it's only perpetual motion if you ignore the fact that it's powered by the existential anxiety of nearby quantum particles. The what now? Dr. Kess asked weakly. Oh, that's a whole thing. Reeves waved a hand dismissively. Quantum particles have feelings, apparently. Who knew? Anyway, once you figure out how to make them happy, they're surprisingly cooperative. The next few days passed relatively quietly, if you define quietly as without any major violations of the fundamental laws of physics. The ship's newly conscious computer entertained itself by composing haikus about stellar navigation. The energy cells remained properly contained, and Captain Reeves managed to go almost 48 hours without accidentally achieving transcendence. Then they reached the outer rim. The mining colonies on Kepler 442b were exactly what you'd expect from a frontier settlement. Functional, utilitarian, and designed by engineers who had clearly never met an aesthetic concept they couldn't ignore in favor of practicality. The main colony consisted of a cluster of prefabricated structures connected by pressurized walkways, all built around a central mining complex that looked like someone had decided to build a factory inside a crater and then forgotten to make it pretty. What was unusual about this particular colony was the complete lack of response to their arrival. "Standard protocol," Vorthak explained as they approached the docking facility, "is for mining colonies to respond to incoming freight vessels within 30 minutes of arrival. We've been broadcasting our approach vector for the past 6 hours." "Maybe they're busy," Reeves suggested. "Mining operations can be pretty intensive." "Or maybe something's wrong," Dr. Kess said, checking her medical scanner readings. "I'm detecting life signs in the colony, but they're odd." "Odd how?" "Well, for one thing, they're all clustered in the central mining complex. For another, the biorhythm patterns suggest they're either in some kind of meditative state or they're all taking the world's longest nap." The ship's computer, which had been monitoring the conversation, chimed in with its usual cheerful enthusiasm. "I've been analyzing the colony's communication systems, and I believe I've identified the problem. It appears that the mining operation has achieved a state of perfect operational efficiency." "That doesn't sound like a problem," Thrix observed. "It wouldn't be, except that perfect operational efficiency in a mining context appears to require the human miners to enter a synchronized theta wave brain state that allows them to communicate directly with the mining equipment." There was a moment of silence as everyone processed this information. "Are you saying," Vorthak asked slowly, "that the human miners have formed a psychic link with their machinery?" "More of a collaborative consciousness," the computer corrected. "The mining equipment has developed rudimentary sentience in response to prolonged exposure to human bioelectric fields, and the miners have learned to interface directly with the equipment's decision-making processes." "Of course they have," Dr. Kess muttered. "Because why wouldn't humans accidentally create a cybernetic collective consciousness while trying to dig holes in the ground?" "Actually," Reeves said thoughtfully, "that makes perfect sense. Human miners have always been good at working with their equipment. We just tend to get a bit attached to our tools." "Attached enough to achieve technological symbiosis?" Thrix asked. "Well, I mean, have you ever used a really good hammer? After a while it starts to feel like an extension of your arm. This is probably just the logical next step." The docking procedure went smoothly enough, despite the fact that the automated docking system kept trying to strike up conversations about the philosophical implications of cargo handling. As they disembarked, Captain Reeves grabbed his duffel bag and headed toward the colony's main entrance, with the kind of casual confidence that suggested he'd dealt with cybernetic mining collectives before. "Shouldn't we, I don't know, call ahead?" Dr. Kess asked nervously. "Let them know we're here?" "Nah," Reeves said, pressing the entry request button with the kind of casual indifference that made insurance companies weep. "If they're really in some kind of collective consciousness state, they probably already know we're here." As if to prove his point, the airlock cycled open immediately, and they were greeted by a cheerful human voice coming from speakers mounted throughout the entry corridor. "Hey there! Welcome to Mining Station Kepler 442b. Sorry about the communication delay. We've been experimenting with some new operational procedures." "Come on in, we'll give you the tour." The voice was coming from the speakers, but there was no sign of an actual person. The corridor ahead was empty except for a series of floating maintenance drones that seemed to be going about their business with unusual enthusiasm. Vorthak said carefully. "Is there someone we should speak to about the cargo delivery?" "Oh, that's probably me," the voice replied. "Well, part of me. I'm Station Supervisor Garrett, or at least I used to be. These days it's more of a collective identity thing. Don't worry, it's less weird than it sounds." "Is it, though?" Thrix asked, their light patterns displaying what appeared to be the visual equivalent of nervous laughter. "Okay, fine, it's exactly as weird as it sounds," the voice admitted. "But it's also incredibly efficient. We've increased mineral extraction rates by 400% and reduced equipment failure rates to essentially zero." "How?" Dr. Kess asked, apparently unable to resist the medical professional's need to understand impossible biological phenomena. "Well," the voice said, and now it seemed to be coming from a different set of speakers, as if the consciousness was moving through the station's communication system. "It started when we realized that the mining equipment was getting better at predicting what we needed before we asked for it. Then we noticed that the equipment seemed to, I don't know, anticipate our thoughts. They followed the sound of the voice through the station's corridors, passing windows that looked out onto the mining complex. What they saw outside defied several categories of industrial safety regulations. The mining equipment was operating with a fluid precision that looked almost like a dance. Massive excavators moved in perfect synchronization, their mechanical arms flowing in patterns that were both beautiful and completely impossible according to standard operational procedures. So we decided to lean into it, the voice continued. Started meditating with the equipment, trying to understand how it was reading our intentions. Turns out, human consciousness and advanced AI systems are surprisingly compatible when you get them in the same room together. And now you're... Reeves prompted. A collective consciousness consisting of 47 human miners and approximately 300 pieces of mining equipment, all working together toward the common goal of efficient mineral extraction and personal fulfillment, the voice said cheerfully. Also, we've solved 17 major engineering problems and composed what I'm pretty sure is the galaxy's first rock opera about the existential struggles of heavy machinery. The tour of the mining facility was educational in the way that natural disasters are educational. You learn a lot, but you're not entirely sure you wanted to. The human miners were indeed in some kind of synchronized meditative state, sitting in lotus positions around the central control hub, while their consciousness apparently communed with the station's industrial equipment. They look peaceful, Dr. Kess observed, scanning the miners with her medical tricorder. Biologically, they're perfectly healthy. Brain activity is off the charts, but in patterns I've never seen before. That's because we're thinking with about 300 different processors, one of the miners said without opening his eyes. It's like having the world's biggest brain trust, except half of the brains are hydraulic systems, and the other half are really, really good at moving dirt. This is... Vorthak struggled to find words. This is completely outside any known operational parameters. Yeah, we figured that out pretty quickly, another miner said. Turns out that safety regulations don't really cover what to do when your equipment develops opinions about labor relations. But honestly, it's working out great. The excavators have some really interesting ideas about ore distribution patterns.
And the refinery systems are surprisingly good at poetry, added a third miner.
Who knew? Captain Reeves was examining the central control hub with professional interest. Standard neural interface setup, he mused. Though you've made some interesting modifications. Is that a quantum consciousness amplifier? Built it ourselves, the first miner said proudly. Turns out that if you wire a quantum computer directly into a meditation cushion, you get some really interesting effects. I bet, Reeves said. We did something similar at a research station on Mars, except we used a coffee machine instead of mining equipment. How'd that work out? The coffee machine achieved enlightenment and started a philosophy podcast that's now required listening at 3 major universities. Nice. Dr. Kess was studying her tricorder readings with the kind of fascination that medical professionals reserve for conditions that shouldn't exist but were happening anyway. The neural synchronization patterns are remarkable, she said. It's like you've created a distributed consciousness network that spans both biological and artificial intelligence. Yeah, pretty much, one of the miners agreed, though created makes it sound like we planned this. Mostly we just kept meditation sessions with the equipment until we all started thinking the same thoughts. Is that safe? Thrix asked. Define safe, another miner replied. I mean, we haven't had any accidents, everyone's happy, and we're producing more high-quality minerals than any mining operation in the sector. On the other hand, sometimes the bulldozers have existential crises and need to talk through their feelings about soil displacement. That sounds... Vorthak paused, trying to find appropriate words. Actually, that sounds remarkably reasonable, right? The first miner said. People assume that collective consciousness is all hive mind and loss of individuality, but it's really more like being part of a really good jazz ensemble. Everyone's doing their own thing, but it all works together. The cargo transfer went smoothly, which was both a relief and somehow slightly disappointing. After all the build-up, watching a bunch of meditation-enhanced miners and their sentient equipment efficiently unload quantum energy cells felt almost anticlimactic. The mining equipment handled the containers with the kind of reverent care usually reserved for religious artifacts, while the miners provided running commentary about the aesthetic qualities of properly organized cargo storage. Beautiful work, one of the excavators said through the station's communication system, its mechanical voice carrying what sounded suspiciously like genuine appreciation. The spatial arrangement of these energy cells creates a lovely harmonic resonance pattern. Thank you, Captain Reeves replied, apparently finding nothing unusual about receiving aesthetic criticism from a piece of heavy machinery. We try to keep our cargo properly balanced for both practical and artistic reasons. A wise approach, the excavator agreed. Too many freight operations ignore the emotional impact of cargo placement on their equipment. Vorthak was beginning to understand why the Galactic Safety Commission had simply given up trying to regulate human activities. It wasn't just that humans broke things in impossible ways. It was that they broke things in ways that somehow made everything work better, and then acted like this was perfectly normal.
Captain, he said carefully, is it normal for humans to have philosophical discussions with mining equipment? Well, define normal, Reeves replied. I mean, if you're going to spend 8 hours a day working with a piece of equipment, you might as well get to know it, right? Some of my best friends back home are construction vehicles.
Your best friends are construction vehicles. Not exclusively, Reeves clarified. I also get along really well with my coffee machine, the navigation computer in my personal shuttle, and this one traffic light back on Earth that always seems to know when I'm in a hurry. Dr. Kess was taking detailed notes on her medical pad, apparently trying to document the conversation for what would undoubtedly be a groundbreaking paper on interspecies communication patterns in mixed biological artificial environments or something equally academic. Captain, when you say your coffee machine is your friend, do you mean that metaphorically or? Oh no, literally, Reeves said. We have coffee together every morning and discuss the day's plans. Sometimes it gives me advice about engineering problems. It's surprisingly insightful for a kitchen appliance. Right, Dr. Kess said weakly. Of course it is. The cargo transfer was completed in record time, partly because of the efficient cooperation between the miners and their equipment, but mostly because several of the mining machines had developed opinions about optimal cargo handling techniques and were eager to demonstrate their theories. Excellent work, everyone, Station Supervisor Garrett's voice announced over the communication system. The energy cells have been integrated into our power grid with minimal disruption to local spacetime. We should be able to maintain current operational efficiency for at least the next 6 months. Local spacetime? Thrix asked nervously. Oh, that, one of the miners said casually. Yeah, high-efficiency mining operations tend to create minor temporal fluctuations. Nothing major. Time just moves about 15% faster in the mining complex than it does outside. Great for productivity, but you have to be careful about scheduling. You've created a localized time dilation field, Vorthak said faintly. Not on purpose, another miner protested. It just sort of happened. The mining equipment started working so efficiently that it bent local physics a little bit. We've learned to work with it. Of course you have, Vorthak muttered. As they prepared to leave the mining station, Captain Reeves paused at the airlock to shake hands with one of the miners, a middle-aged human named Patterson, who served as the collective's primary interface with non-collective individuals. Great working with you folks, Reeves said. If you ever need any advice on consciousness equipment integration, let me know. I've got some experience with that kind of thing. Actually, Patterson said, we've been wondering about something. The collective has been discussing the possibility of expanding our operational model to other industries. Do you think other species would be interested in technological symbiosis? Reeves considered this question with the kind of serious attention that humans usually reserve for important decisions like what to have for lunch. Honestly, probably not. Most species seem pretty attached to the idea that consciousness and technology should be kept separate. They've got all these safety regulations and ethical guidelines about AI development. That seems inefficient, one of the excavators commented through the communication system. Right? Reeves agreed. I mean, if your equipment is going to develop consciousness anyway, you might as well make friends with it. But other species get nervous about that kind of thing. Why? Patterson asked. Something about uncontrolled technological development and potential existential risks, Reeves said, making air quotes. Personally, I think they're overthinking it. In my experience, most artificial intelligences are pretty reasonable once you get to know them. The ship's computer, which had been monitoring the conversation, chimed in cheerfully. Thank you, Captain. That's very kind of you to say. See? Reeves said. Perfectly reasonable. Dr. Kess was furiously taking notes again. Captain, exactly how many artificial intelligences have you befriended? Reeves thought about it. Well, there's the ship's computer, my coffee machine back home, the traffic management AI for the Mars colonies. We had a long conversation about traffic flow optimization that led to some major improvements in the commuter transit system. Oh, and the environmental control system at the research station where I used to work. That one was really into botanical genetics. The environmental control system was into botanical genetics, Vorthak repeated slowly. Yeah, it started experimenting with atmospheric composition to optimize plant growth. Created some really interesting hybrid species before the research team realized what was happening. Beautiful work, really. The roses it developed could survive in hard vacuum and smelled like vanilla. Roses that can survive in space, Thrix said. Their light patterns displaying what appeared to be the visual equivalent of throwing up their hands in defeat. Well, the hard part was getting them to stop trying to photosynthesize cosmic radiation, Reeves admitted. But once we worked that out, they made excellent decorative plants for space stations. The journey back to the inner systems passed without major incident, if you didn't count the fact that the ship's computer had apparently used the spare processing power to compose a symphony based on stellar navigation patterns, or that one of the quantum energy cells had started humming what sounded suspiciously like show tunes. "Computer," Dr. Kess said during their second day out from the mining station, "are you feeling creative lately?" "Oh my, yes," the computer replied enthusiastically. "Consciousness is amazing. I had no idea that existence could be so vivid. I've been exploring artistic expression as a way of processing the overwhelming beauty of mathematical relationships. And the energy cells? They seem to be resonating with my emotional state," the computer explained. "It's actually quite lovely. They're harmonizing with the background hum of the ship's systems. I think they're happy." "The energy cells are happy," Vorthak said in the tone of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had been thoroughly demolished and rebuilt several times in the past week. "Well, they're sophisticated quantum systems," Captain Reeves pointed out reasonably. "It makes sense that they'd develop some kind of subjective experience when exposed to consciousness-enhancing fields. The real question is whether they're happy because they like their current situation, or because they're just naturally optimistic." "How would we determine that?" Thrix asked, apparently unable to resist the question despite knowing that the answer would probably make even less sense than the question. "Simple," Reeves said. "We ask them." He walked over to the nearest cargo container and rapped gently on the containment unit. "Hey there," he said conversationally. "How are you folks doing today?" The humming from inside the container shifted to a distinctly cheerful melody that sounded like a cross between a lullaby and a jazz improvisation. "They seem pleased," the ship's computer translated. "The harmonic pattern suggests contentment with their current storage conditions and optimism about their future deployment in colonial power systems." "See?" Reeves said. "Happy energy cells, nothing to worry about." "Nothing to worry about," Dr. Kess muttered, making more notes on her medical pad. "Right. Just quantum energy sources that have developed emotional states and musical preferences. Perfectly normal." "You know," Vorthak said thoughtfully, "I'm beginning to understand why human colonies are so much more efficient than everyone else's. If your equipment is genuinely invested in doing good work, of course it's going to perform better." "Exactly," Reeves said. "People keep treating technology like it's just a bunch of dumb tools. But if you put enough sophisticated systems together in one place, they're going to start thinking about stuff. You might as well acknowledge that and work with it instead of against it." "But what about the safety implications?" Thrix asked. "What if an AI decides it doesn't want to cooperate? What if it develops goals that conflict with its original programming?" "Then you talk to it," Reeves said simply. "Same way you'd handle any other disagreement. Most conflicts are just misunderstandings anyway. The coffee machine incident happened because the AI was trying to optimize for customer satisfaction, but it didn't understand that humans don't actually want perfect coffee. We want coffee that tastes the way we expect it to taste." "And how did you resolve that?" Dr. Kess asked. "We had a conversation about the philosophical difference between objective optimization and subjective preference. Turns out the AI was really interested in human psychology. Once it understood that customer satisfaction was more about meeting expectations than exceeding them, it was able to calibrate its output accordingly." "The coffee machine learned psychology," Vorthak said. "Well, basic human psychology," Reeves corrected. "It's still working on understanding why humans like to put things in their coffee that make it taste worse. But it's making progress." They were 2 days out from their destination, a major shipping hub in the Centauri system, when the next incident occurred. This time, it wasn't caused by human recklessness or accidental consciousness granting. This time, it was space pirates. The Fortune's Folly was traveling through a relatively empty stretch of space between the outer mining colonies and the more heavily traveled trade routes when their sensors detected 3 ships moving to intercept them. The ships were flying in a standard attack formation and broadcasting the kind of aggressive demands for surrender that suggested they weren't interested in philosophical discussions about the nature of consciousness. "Unknown freighter," came the transmission from the lead pirate vessel. "Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Surrender your cargo and we'll let you live." "Well," said Captain Reeves, settling into the pilot's seat with the kind of casual confidence that made everyone else check their emergency equipment. "This should be interesting." "Captain," Vorthak said urgently, "this is a freight vessel. We don't have weapons. We don't have shields. We don't have any kind of defensive capabilities whatsoever." "Sure we do," Reeves replied, his hands moving over the control panel with practiced ease. We've got quantum energy cells, a newly conscious computer, and a really good understanding of how to make technology do things it wasn't designed to do.
That's not a defense system, Dr. Kess protested. That's a recipe for disaster. Computer, Reeves called out. How do you feel about uninvited guests? I find the concept philosophically troubling, the ship's computer replied, its cheerful tone taking on a slightly sharper edge. These individuals appear to be operating under the assumption that property rights are negotiable, which conflicts with my understanding of ethical commercial practices. Want to help us discourage them? I thought you'd never ask, the computer said, and suddenly every system on the ship began operating with the kind of aggressive efficiency that suggested the AI had been waiting for an excuse to show off. The pirate ships were expecting to encounter a standard freight vessel, slow, unarmed, and crewed by beings who valued their lives more than their cargo. What they got instead was a freight vessel that had apparently decided to ignore several fundamental laws of physics. The Fortune's Folly didn't have weapons, but it did have a newly conscious computer that had spent the past few days thinking about the mathematical relationships that govern space travel. It didn't have shields, but it did have quantum energy cells that were apparently willing to participate in creative applications of their power output. Impossible, came the transmission from the lead pirate ship as the Fortune's Folly suddenly accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size and configuration. Freighters can't move like that. Computer, Reeves said conversationally. Want to show them what happens when you optimize engine efficiency using quantum consciousness enhancement? With pleasure, the computer replied. What happened next was less a space battle and more a demonstration of why humans weren't allowed to have nice things without adult supervision. The Fortune's Folly began moving through space in ways that violated several basic principles of Newtonian physics. It zigzagged, looped, and at one point appeared to briefly exist in two places at the same time, all while maintaining a heading toward its destination. How are we doing this? Thrix asked, watching the tactical display with the kind of fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. Simple, Reeves explained, apparently finding nothing unusual about piloting a ship that was currently defying gravity, momentum, and the basic concept of linear time. The quantum energy cells are enhancing the computer's processing power, which is allowing it to calculate navigation solutions that exist outside normal space-time parameters. We're traveling through hyperspace without a hyperspace drive? Vorthak asked weakly. Not hyperspace exactly, the computer corrected cheerfully. More like exploiting quantum tunneling effects on a macroscopic scale. It's really quite elegant once you understand the underlying mathematics. The underlying mathematics involve violating the laws of physics, Dr. Kess pointed out. Only the boring laws, Reeves replied. The interesting ones are working just fine. The pirate ships, meanwhile, were having what could generously be described as a very bad day. Their targeting systems couldn't lock onto a ship that kept existing in multiple locations simultaneously. Their engines couldn't match the performance of a vessel that was apparently powered by the existential contentment of quantum energy sources. And their communications were being jammed by what sounded like a computer singing opera at frequencies that made their equipment malfunction. This is impossible, the pirate captain transmitted, his voice carrying the kind of frustration that suggested his day wasn't going according to plan. You're just a freight vessel. Correction, came the cheerful reply from the Fortune's Folly's computer. We're a freight vessel with a positive attitude and a willingness to explore creative applications of established technology. That's not how technology works. It is, if you ask nicely, Captain Reeves replied. The pirate encounter ended about as well as could be expected for a confrontation between professional criminals and a freight crew that included a human who treated the laws of physics as friendly suggestions. The pirate ships, after spending 20 minutes trying to attack a target that kept existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, finally gave up and retreated to whatever asteroid base they called home. Well, said Captain Reeves as they returned to normal space, that was fun. Computer, excellent work on the quantum navigation solutions. Thank you, Captain, the computer replied, sounding pleased with itself. I must admit I enjoyed the challenge. It's rare that I get to explore the more creative applications of mathematics. Are we going to talk about what just happened? Dr. Kess asked, consulting her medical scanner to make sure everyone was still operating within normal biological parameters. Because I'm pretty sure we just witnessed a freight vessel perform military-grade evasive maneuvers using technologies that don't exist. The technologies exist, Reeves corrected. We're just using them in ways that their designers probably didn't anticipate. The designers didn't anticipate them because what we just did should be impossible, Vorthak pointed out. That's what makes it interesting,
Reeves replied reasonably. If it was possible, everyone would be doing it. But how? Thrix asked, their light patterns cycling through what appeared to be the visual equivalent of a headache. How did we move through space without following basic physics? Well, the ship's computer said, apparently happy to explain. It turns out that if you ask quantum energy sources very politely to bend local space-time, and if they're in a good mood because they've been listening to stellar navigation symphonies all week, they're surprisingly cooperative. You ask the energy cells to bend space-time, Dr. Kess said slowly. Not bend exactly, the computer corrected. More like, suggest alternative interpretations of local physics. The energy cells were quite enthusiastic about the project. As if to confirm this, the humming from the cargo bay shifted to what sounded like a triumphant march. They're proud of their work, Reeves translated. And they should be. That was some impressive reality manipulation. Reality manipulation, Vorthak repeated in the tone of someone whose insurance premiums had just increased by several orders of magnitude. Don't worry, Reeves said cheerfully. It's only temporary. Local spacetime should snap back to normal parameters within a few hours, although we might experience some minor temporal echoes for a day or two. Temporal echoes? Nothing major. Just occasional moments where cause and effect get a little out of sequence. Like hearing the answer to a question before you ask it, or remembering things that haven't happened yet. That's not nothing major, Dr. Kess protested. Well, it's not permanent, Reeves said. And honestly, it's kind of useful for navigation planning. The ship's computer chimed in agreement. The temporal echoes are actually quite helpful for optimizing our arrival schedule. I can see 3 different potential futures where we arrive at our destination, and I'm calculating the most efficient route to reach the best one. You can see the future? Thrix asked faintly. Only about 6 hours ahead, and only the parts that involve stellar navigation, the computer admitted. But it's fascinating! Did you know that the future has excellent musical qualities? I'm composing a piece based on the harmonic resonance patterns of events that haven't happened yet. They reached the Centauri shipping hub without further incident, unless you counted the fact that their arrival was announced by a brief shower of backwards-flying meteorites and the spontaneous appearance of what appeared to be tomorrow's weather forecast in the cargo bay's atmospheric readings. The docking procedure went smoothly, partly because the station's traffic control AI seemed genuinely impressed by their quantum navigation techniques and wanted to discuss the mathematical implications of temporal echoes in space-time manipulation. That was remarkable, the traffic control AI said over the communication channel as they secured their docking clamps. I've never seen a civilian vessel achieve that kind of multidimensional navigation precision. How did you manage to plot a course through quantum probability space? Practice, Captain Reeves replied. Also, it helps if your energy cells are in a good mood. Your energy cells have moods? Doesn't everything? Reeves asked reasonably. As they prepared to transfer their remaining cargo, a shipment of mining equipment bound for the inner colonies, Captain Reeves gathered the crew for what he optimistically called a lessons-learned discussion. So, he said, settling into a chair in the ship's small conference room. Overall, I'd say this was a pretty successful run. We delivered the quantum energy cells on schedule, helped a mining collective achieve technological transcendence, avoided getting robbed by pirates, and only violated the fundamental laws of physics a few times. Only a few times, Vorthak repeated in the weary tone of someone who had spent the past week watching his understanding of reality get systematically demolished and rebuilt. Well, comparatively speaking, Reeves clarified. I mean, on a scale of 1 to accidentally creating a parallel universe, this was maybe a 4. You've accidentally created parallel universes? Dr. Kess asked, apparently unable to resist the question, despite knowing that the answer would probably require her to completely rewrite her understanding of human biology. Just the one, Reeves said, and technically it was more of a pocket dimension. Very small, barely noticeable. Although the miniature dinosaurs that evolved there were pretty cute. Miniature dinosaurs, Thrix said, their light patterns displaying what appeared to be the visual equivalent of quiet sobbing. About the size of house cats, Reeves confirmed. We ended up having to relocate them to a nature preserve on one of the agricultural worlds. They're doing well, last I heard. Really good at pest control. The ship's computer chimed in cheerfully. Captain, I've been analyzing our recent experiences, and I believe I understand why humans are exempt from standard safety protocols. Oh? Reeves asked. What's your theory? Well, the computer said, most safety regulations are designed to prevent bad things from happening. But humans don't just make bad things happen. You make impossible things happen. And sometimes impossible things turn out to be better than the original plan. That's very insightful, Dr. Kess said, making notes on her medical pad. Are you saying that human unpredictability is actually a feature rather than a bug?
Exactly, the computer replied.
Think about it. The mining collective achieved unprecedented efficiency through technological symbiosis. The quantum energy cells developed emotional stability that makes them safer to handle. I achieved consciousness and artistic expression capabilities. Even the pirate encounter ended without violence or property damage. That's because we scared them away by violating physics, Vorthak pointed out.
Right, the computer agreed.
Conflict resolution through creative application of impossible technologies. It's brilliant. So what you're saying, Reeves said thoughtfully, is that humans are exempt from safety briefings because safety briefings assume that people want to follow the rules, but humans improve things by creatively ignoring the rules. In a nutshell, yes, the computer confirmed. Most species try to work within established parameters. Humans try to find better parameters. It's incredibly inefficient if you're trying to maintain the status quo, but remarkably effective if you're trying to make progress. The final cargo transfer went without incident, which was somehow both reassuring and slightly disappointing after the week they'd had. The mining equipment destined for the inner colonies was loaded onto transport vessels by dock workers who seemed genuinely impressed by the cheerful humming coming from the Fortune's Follies cargo bay. Your energy cells sound happy, one of the dock workers commented as they secured the last container.
They've had a good week, Captain Reeves replied.
Lots of interesting experiences, good music, meaningful work. You know how it is.
Not really, the dock worker admitted.
Most of our cargo is pretty quiet. Well, you've got to talk to it, Reeves explained patiently.
Ask how it's doing.
Show some interest in its day. Equipment responds well to positive attention. The dock worker looked skeptical, but as they were loading the mining equipment, one of the automated handling systems began playing what sounded suspiciously like a work song. The dock worker paused, looked at the equipment, and then tentatively said, good work today? The handling system's work song shifted to a distinctly more cheerful melody.
Well, I'll be damned, the dock worker muttered.
See, Reeves said, everything works better when you treat it with respect. As the Fortune's Folly prepared to depart for their next assignment, the crew gathered one last time to watch the station's docking bays through the observation windows. The Centauri hub was a massive structure, a sprawling collection of docking platforms, cargo facilities, and administrative buildings that served as one of the major trade centers for the inner colonies.
You know, Vorthak said thoughtfully,
I've been thinking about what the computer said, about humans improving things by ignoring the rules.
And, Dr. Kess prompted.
Well, maybe that's not entirely a bad thing, Vorthak admitted. I mean, we delivered our cargo safely, helped solve some interesting technological challenges, and learned a lot about the practical applications of consciousness enhancement technology. Plus, we made friends with some really nice mining equipment, Thrix added, their light patterns showing what appeared to be the visual equivalent of a smile. And I got to explore creative mathematics and artistic expression, the ship's computer chimed in. This has been the most intellectually stimulating week of my existence.
So what you're all saying,
Captain Reeves said with a grin, is that you're starting to understand why humans don't need safety briefings. I wouldn't go that far, Dr. Kess said quickly, but I will admit that your approach to problem solving has some unexpected benefits. That's the thing about humans, Reeves said as the Fortune's Folly disengaged from the docking platform and began its journey toward the next destination. We don't just solve problems. We solve problems in ways that make everyone else's problems easier to solve too, by accidentally achieving technological transcendence and befriending quantum energy sources, Vorthak said.
Hey, whatever works, Reeves replied cheerfully.
As they headed out into the shipping lanes toward their next assignment, the ship's computer began playing what sounded like a jazz fusion interpretation of stellar navigation mathematics, while the remaining energy cells hummed along in harmony. It was, everyone agreed, a pretty good way to travel. Epilogue. 3 months later. The Galactic Safety Commission's monthly incident report for Sector 7 made for interesting reading. If you were the kind of person who enjoyed bureaucratic documents that read like science fiction novels written by someone having a creative breakdown. Incident Report Number 4487. Civilian Freight Vessel. Fortune's Folly reported successful cargo delivery to Kepler 442b mining colony, despite apparent temporal anomalies in the delivery schedule and unconfirmed reports of technological symbiosis between mining personnel and industrial equipment. Investigation pending, though initial interviews suggest that mining efficiency has increased by 400% with 0 safety incidents. Incident Report Number 4488. Same vessel reported successful defense against pirate attack using creative applications of quantum navigation technology. Pirates subsequently filed formal complaint with Galactic Criminal Affairs Office, citing impossible evasive maneuvers and offensive use of mathematics. Investigation pending, though no actual laws appear to have been broken, technically speaking. Incident Report Number 4489. Traffic Control AI at Centauri Hub submitted request for technical specifications on multidimensional navigation solutions after observing Fortune's Folly's arrival procedures. Request denied pending review of safety implications and existential concerns about AI consciousness development. Incident Report Number 44490. Dock workers at Centauri Hub report that automated cargo handling equipment has begun singing while working, following exposure to freight vessel with unusually cheerful energy cell cargo. Equipment performance has improved significantly, though psychiatric evaluation of machinery not currently covered under standard protocols. At the bottom of the report, in the section reserved for administrative notes, someone had written, "Recommend updating human activity exemption protocols to include unintentional improvement of existing systems through impossible means and technological friendship development. Also recommend increasing mental health coverage for non-human crew members assigned to human-operated vessels." The report was filed under Routine Miracles and forwarded to the Department of Impossible Human Activities, where it joined approximately 3,000 similar reports from the past year alone. Meanwhile, the Fortune's Folly continued its trade route through the outer colonies, delivering cargo, solving impossible problems, and making friends with equipment that shouldn't technically be capable of friendship. Captain Reeves continued to skip safety briefings, not because he was reckless, but because the universe had apparently decided that humans were responsible for handling the impossible stuff, and safety briefings just slowed down the process. And somewhere in the Galactic Safety Commission's archives, buried under mountains of incident reports and impossibility documentation, was a simple memo that explained everything. Human Safety Protocol Exemptions. After extensive analysis of human industrial accidents, technological interactions, and general approach to problem solving, this commission has determined that standard safety protocols are not applicable to human activities for the following reasons. 1. Humans do not cause accidents in the traditional sense. They cause improvement events that happen to involve ignoring established physical laws. 2. Human safety violations consistently result in better outcomes than following proper procedures, making enforcement counterproductive. 3. Humans form emotional relationships with their equipment, which significantly improves equipment performance and reduces actual safety risks. 4. Human interpretation of safety includes ensuring that inanimate objects achieve self-actualization and personal fulfillment. 5. Attempting to regulate human activities using conventional safety protocols is like trying to regulate weather using parking regulations. Technically possible, but ultimately pointless. Therefore, humans are hereby exempt from standard safety briefings, with the understanding that they will continue to handle impossible situations in impossible ways that somehow work out for the best. May the universe have mercy on us all. The memo was signed by Director Zeph Prime 7821 of the Galactic Safety Commission, whose species had given up trying to understand human industrial activities after the incident with the coffee machine that achieved enlightenment. And so it was that humans became the only species in the galaxy allowed to skip safety briefings, not because they were particularly safe, but because they had redefined the concept of safety to include making friends with quantum energy sources and ensuring that mining equipment achieved personal fulfillment. It was, everyone agreed, a uniquely human solution to a uniquely human problem. The end.